Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting inside the head of Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, which is, the company right at the absolute heart of the AI revolution.
So, let's just kick things off with this pretty stark prediction from the man himself. It really sets the stage for why understanding his perspective on, well, everything, from the stock market to global politics, is just so incredibly important right now.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. We're going to look at his thinking across 5 key battlegrounds. First, is this whole thing a giant bubble? Then we'll get into Nvidia's unique strategy, the tightrope walk between the US and China, the race for global AI dominance, and finally, what it all means for us and our jobs.
All right, first up, the multi-trillion-dollar question. With AI company values shooting through the roof, are we just living in a massive financial bubble that's waiting to pop?
Well, when he's asked this very question, he doesn't totally deny it. He kind of admits, yeah, there's always some irrationality floating around in the market, but he argues that if you're only focused on that, you are missing the much, much bigger story.
And this is where we get to the absolute core of his argument. He says this boom isn't just hype about some new shiny product. No, this is a historic, fundamental shift in how computing itself works. We're moving away from the old, slow, general-purpose way to this new, super-fast paradigm called accelerated computing.
So get this, from his point of view, the insane amount of money pouring into AI right now, that's not the peak of a bubble. He sees it as a relatively small down payment on rebuilding the entire world's computing infrastructure.
Okay, so that long-term vision, it really helps explain Nvidia's next move, which is, well, it's pretty controversial. They're investing in the very same companies that happen to be their biggest customers.
Now, the critics are definitely worried. They see this and think, wait a minute, isn't this creating a fragile house of cards? Like if these AI startups go bust, do they take Nvidia down with them? It's a really serious question, but Huang has a very clear defense.
He doesn't see it as a risk at all. He frames it as a smart, multi-layered strategic play. For one, it helps build out the whole Nvidia ecosystem. It also gives them what he calls a front-row seat to see where the industry is headed. And, maybe most importantly, he argues the investments are such a tiny fraction of their revenue that there's just no way they could create that dangerous circularity people are worried about.
All right, let's pull back the camera now and zoom out to the massive geopolitical chessboard, because the heart of the AI story really is the incredibly tense and complicated tech relationship between the United States and China. And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures the tension he sees. You hear all this talk about conflict and decoupling, but he believes that, at their core, these two economic giants are fundamentally deeply tangled up with each other. And believe me, this isn't just theory. We've seen this delicate dance play out dramatically over the past year. It's been a constant back and forth over chip exports, right? The US blocks a chip, some inflammatory comments get made, China rejects the new chip, and then poof, the policy shifts all over again. It's moving so fast, it's almost impossible to predict.
And what Huang points out is that the real issue here, the core problem, is that both countries have goals that are completely at odds with each other. The US wants to sell its tech in China's huge market, but also limit China's access to the really advanced stuff. Meanwhile, China wants access to the best American tech, but also wants to build up its own industry to dominate its own market. You can see the fundamental conflict there.
So, what's his solution? Well, he's really pushing for moderation, for nuance. He argues that these all-or-nothing policies, like a total tech blockade, are actually really dangerous. Why? Because you never, ever want to push an adversary completely to the wall. That, he says, is when you get unexpected and very, very risky results.
Okay, but this isn't just about China. Huang is looking at a much bigger global race for AI dominance, and a recent huge deal with Saudi Arabia is a perfect example of how he's thinking.
So when the Trump administration initially blocked chip sales to the region, Huang went to them and laid out this really simple but powerful logic. He basically said, look, every single nation on Earth is going to build AI. That's a given. The only real question is whose technology are they going to use to do it? And from his perspective, just handing over a massive market to a competitor is just not a winning strategy.
And this brings us to his ultimate goal, his grand vision. He's constantly talking about the American tech stack. What he means is the whole shebang, the hardware, the software, the cloud, everything. He wants that ecosystem to become the undisputed global standard, the foundation that everyone, everywhere, builds their AI future on. All right, for our last section, let's bring all this high-level stuff right down to the personal level. What does this massive, world-changing revolution actually mean for our jobs, and for the guy right at the center of it all?
This is the big one, right? The question that's on pretty much everyone's mind. But when you ask him about it, Huang offers a vision for the future that's, well, it's surprisingly optimistic.
Okay, so he starts here. Today's global economy, the GDP of the whole world, is worth about $100 trillion. A huge number, right?
But here's the twist. He doesn't think AI is going to shrink that economic pie. He thinks it's going to make it astronomically bigger. He sees a future where we empower billions more people with AI tools, potentially quintupling the global GDP, creating way more prosperity, not less.
So for him, the crucial takeaway isn't about replacement, it's about adaptation. He's famous for saying it. AI itself won't take your job, but a person who knows how to use AI will. The key is that everyone will need to learn these new tools to stay in the game as jobs change and totally new roles we can't even imagine are created.
So, what about the man himself? You know, he's on top of the world, running arguably the most important company on the planet. What does he enjoy? Well, the answer is surprisingly and refreshingly simple. His family, working with his kids at his own company, his dogs, and, yeah, enjoying some Korean fried chicken.
And getting this glimpse inside the mind of one of AI's key architects leaves us with one final, really vital question. As this incredibly powerful technology continues to completely reshape our world, what human values will, and what values should, ultimately be steering its course?